Okay, so Revi'i of Bamidbar moves to another Toldot, which is interesting, right? Because if you remember, in Breshit, the Rashbam argues that the entire theme of the Sefer is Toldot. You have 10 Toldot, and the Rashbam goes as far as to argue that essentially that's the spine of Breshit. The stories are almost just filling to explain how we got from one to the other. And again, we said for us that's counterintuitive, but when you think about it, that really is in many ways what Breshit is, right? Breshit is the story of how did it happen that God went from choosing all of humanity to choosing the Jewish people, and the main point is, why is it that we start with Toldot Adam, and by the end, the only thing we care about are the Toldot of the Jewish people? The answer is the narratives. So the narratives are very important to explain this chosenness, but the meta message of the book is that Toldot. So it's striking that you have a Toldot here in Bamidbar, especially since if you contrast it with the first half of the Parsha, we are counting all the Jewish people, but we couldn't care less, so to speak, about their Toldot, meaning we want their numbers, but we don't find out who's in their family. And yet, suddenly, Levi, we do care. Or Toldot Moshe Aaron more specifically, we do care. So that forces you to ask to what's going on here, right? Because it really is striking when you think about it. If you skip 3 psukim behind Revi, so Perek Bet, Pasuk Lamed Bet, and I want you just to feel how striking this is, right? It's Elef Kudei Bnei Israel Ve'Rovotam, Kol Pekudei HaMachanot L'Tzevotam Shishmon Elef U'Shlosh Alafim V'Chamishim. This is the count of the Jewish people. Count. V'Aleviim Lo Itpakadu B'Toch Bnei Israel Kasher Tziva Adonai Moshe. And the Leviim aren't counted amongst the rest of them. So they get their own count. So what you would expect is only to have a census of the Leviim, okay, because they're not going to war. But you wouldn't expect a Toledot. You would expect a separate census because which is what you get later on in the Parsha. Yeah. But before you get that those numbers, you get Toldot. That for some reason here we care not just about the numbers, and we have to count it separately because the Jews are going to war and the Leviim are going to the Mishkan, but we care about the individual lineage. So why is that here? What is that doing? So then, Revi'i starts, Gimel starts, Ve'el Toldot Aharon u'Moshe biyom diber Adonai ed Moshe Bahar Sinai. And if it weren't clear enough, it's the Toldot on the day that God speaks to Moshe. Ve'ele Shmot B'nei Aharon. HaBechor Nadav Avihu Elazar V'Tamar L'Shmot B'nei Aharon HaKohanim HaMishuchim Asher Mila Yadam L'chaim. Vayam, and if it weren't clear enough, remember how in Breshit we said there's the Toldot and then there's the stories that explain how we got there. You get the same thing here in very short, which is these are the children of Aharon who are going to go into, who were anointed. Vayamad Nadav Avihu L'fnei Adonai B'Akrivam Yisrael L'fnei Adonai Min Mar Sinai B'nim Lo Yulahem V'chein Elazar V'Tamar B'nei Aharon Avihem. And how did we get to the point where Aaron's children are only Elazar and Itamar, and Elazar is in charge? Because remember that story that Nadav and Avihu sinned. It's the exact same model of Breshit, right? Is that even within Aaron you might have expected that it would have been all of his family, but it's not, because 2 of them died because there was a story and they sinned, right? It's the model of Breshit in a microcosm. So who picks up on this? Who is the most literary of the Rishonim, who tends to pick up on things like this? Ramban, right? Even more than that, right? So Ramban picks up on this, and he says, "Ve'ela Toldot Aharon u'Moshe b'yom diber Hashem Moshe." Ba'it Toldot rak Elazar v'Itamar. V'hizkir ze lomar ki b'yom diber Hashem Moshe bar Sinai nivcharu ela lemoshcha otam leyot lahem moshchatam l'chukonan olam u'shar hashevet lo nitztava b'v'chirato ad ata. He says, you know why this is here? Because maybe this is actually when the Leviim were chosen. Maybe until now it was only Mishpachat Aaron, but the uniqueness of Levi is actually being created now. That's a good reason for us to find out about it now, is that this is actually happening. It's not necessarily that they're more important, is that this is when it happens. That God says, and now, if that's the case, then this makes perfect sense with Breshit. Right? Which is, why is it that, right, the same model in Breshit, which is, why do we go from all of humanity to the Jewish people? Now, Bamidbar has to tell us, why is it that the Leviim are different from everybody else? and they're in a different census, and they're going to work in the Mishkan, because they're being chosen by God to work in the Mishkan. Oh, and therefore we got to figure out their family because, as we've said before, the Kohanim, as Jews are to the rest of the world, Kohanim, or in this case, Kohanim and Leviim, are to the rest of Klal Yisrael. And therefore, this fundamentally does model Breshit, that you need a little bit of a Toldot. Right now, it's not quite the same as Breshit, because not everyone else is rejected, but you need an origin story and a Toldot to explain why there's a chosen Shevet even within Bnei Yisrael. Now, I would argue that you do get a little bit of a hint of that origin story. You never get quite the origin story, in the same way. You get it in Shmot, where the Leviim don't. But what origin story could you argue does actually exist in this parsha to explain what's going on? So, but in BAMIDBAR, right? You could have said that that's the origin story, but interestingly, if the Ramban is right that this is when they're chosen, you don't get the Egel story. What do you get?
There's no story.
Correct, there's no story in BAMIDBAR, but there's one little thing, and that is the mitzvah of the Pidyon Bechor. Right? Vayomer Adonai Moshe, Pekod Kol Bechor Zachar, B'nei Yisrael Min Chodesh V'Amal, V'Sad Mizbar Shmotam, V'Lakachtar El Aviyim Li, Ani Adonai, Tachad Kol Bechor B'nei Yisrael, V'Bemat El Aviyim Tachad Kol Bechor B'Bemat B'nei Yisrael. Right? There's the redemption. Why? Right? There's this. Right? So there's this hint at the origin story. Right? It doesn't say it explicitly, but all of Shishi is about the redemption of the Bechors. What seems to be, at some level, this redemption story? Is that... Yeah, right, meaning there's an origin story, which is that really there should have been a chosen group within the Jewish people, namely the Bechors. But Shmot maybe has described why that's not going to be, and the Leviim are chosen because now the rest of Klal Yisrael can't fulfill that function, so you've got to redeem the Bechors because everything happened in Shmot, right? And the Leviim are taking their place. And that's their origin story, right? Meaning there's enough in that mitzvah to hint at what the background narratives are that got us to the point where Levi has to be chosen, which is, you always needed someone to be chosen, and that happened in Mitzrayim where it was the Bechors, but then the Bechors lost their right because of Egel or whatever, and the Leviim redeemed. So I would say that if I had to speculate, that's what's going on here, right? That the Leviim are getting a hint. Again, this is not pure Breshit, because not everyone else is rejected. But there is a Toldot, because this is the story of the chosenness of the Leviim. And the mitzvah of Pidyon Bechor is enough to hint at all the narrative moments that have to get us to the point where you have to tell the Toldot of the Leviim separately from the rest of the Jewish people, because there was all these steps that required a choosing.
I thought the point was that they're a replacement for the dead Bechor.
Not the dead Bechors are alive.
No, I know that they, because the Jewish Bechoros are still alive.
Correct. Meaning the narrative would go something like this. Really, the chosen people amongst the Jewish people should be the Bechor, because they owe their lives to God because they weren't killed.
Right.
But everything that happened in the Egel make it that they're not worthy of it, but fundamentally they still belong to God, so we need to find someone else to take their place, because it should have been them. It's the Leviim, and you hinted that by saying that the Leviim actually have to be the Pidyon of the Bechors, and I think that hints at enough of the narrative steps, which is, the Bechors were the logical chosen people because they owe their lives to God. They don't deserve it. The Leviim redeem them. Therefore, the Leviim are now chosen, and therefore they deserve a Toldot story because they have an act of chosenness. So that's what I would say, that maybe that's what's going on here. Maybe that's what the Ramban is Ramban doesn't say that point. But I think that might explain it. Now he continues, V'tam hiskir Toldot Aaron Moshe b'makom hazeh, ki kasher hishlim mispar kol Yisrael, v'toldotam levei avotam, ratzah laskir Toldot Shevet Levi, hilchil b'rashei HaShevet. Why start with Moshe and Aaron? Simply because they're the leaders of that Shevet. And then he adds, V'al derech hapshat, tam Toldot Aaron and Moshe, lomar sheyu b'nei Aaron kohanim mishuchim, nivdalim min HaShevet liyot kodesh kodashim. And what does the words Toldot Aaron and Moshe literally mean? So Toldot Aharon al pi pshat, he thinks, is that the Aharon are kodesh kodashim. They're the priests. V'toldot Moshe, mishpachat Amrami, asher yazkir lamata. And Moshe's family is only discussed later, which is Amram, meaning everything there is just getting to Amram. V'zeh kinyan shekatuv b'nei Amram Aaron and Moshe ve'Yavdel Aaron lakdisho kodesh kodeshim Moshe isha Elohim banav yikru al shevet Levi v'hadrash samchu mibnei shelo perish ve'ele shemot b'nei Moshe kasher asav b'nei Aaron. And he notes, but I'll be drash. What does it Ziring-Toldot Aaron and Moshe mean? We talked about this last year, but just worth remembering it. Rashi quotes it. The drash of Ziring-Toldot Aaron and Moshe is not, the Raman's pshat is, this is Aaron, and then later on the parsha is Moshe. The drash is that Moshe was the Rebbe of Aaron's kids, and therefore anyone who teaches teaches someone else's kids Torah, a Rebbe is like a parent, and therefore these are both the children of Aaron and Moshe. Right? That's the drash. He just notes at the end, but he says pshat is that this is really the Toldot of Moshe and Aaron. I'll just add one point. We talked about this last year, so I don't want to develop it again. But if you remember, Zev, maybe from last year, that we talked about that it could be that the reason that BAMIDBAR starts so heavy on the Leviim is because the heroes, so to speak, of Vayikra are the Kohanim, because Vayikra is about God's manifestation in the Mishkan, where the Kohanim are the heroes. BAMIDBAR, which is the story of the travels, is how does the Mishkan connect to those who are not sanctified, right? It's the travels, right? And the Leviim, even though they work in the Mishkan, in a certain sense, they're not in the Kodesh, they have responsibilities for the Mishkan that are more oriented towards travel, right? They're carrying the things on their back, and they're not personally kadosh, and therefore they are the logical bridge, because BAMIDBAR, which talks about the relationship to Mishkan on the mundane plane, the Leviim, who have functioned in the Mishkan but are not personally kadosh, and deal with things like traveling and interacting with God in the yom of commuting, as it were, right? The Leviim are the heroes of BAMIDBAR, which is an idea that we developed yesterday, but I think this analysis of the Toldot further emphasizes that point, that it starts not just with the choosing of the Leviim, but a Toldot story, which is, as we know from Breshit, is what always indicates that something here is happening that needs explanation. Okay, so those are my new thoughts on the Toldot B'nai Levi.